Good evening. We'll go ahead and call the April 19th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting to order. Confirmation of the posting and roll call.
This meeting has been posted in accordance to Nevada Open Meeting Law. All members are present except for Member Biasi and Member Cody. You do have a quorum.
Thank you. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You can give me an extra front. On the next remodel, maybe they'll give us a couple more inches. We'll go ahead and move to the first public comment period. This public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. Members of the public may participate in the meeting without being physically present by one of the following methods. Written comments. Do we have any written comments submitted?
No written comments.
Fantastic. Members of the public may call in to 702-589-9629. Seeing as we have no public comment during the first initial public comment period, we'll go ahead and close that. Moving on to agenda item number 1 for possible action, approval of the minutes of the March 15th, 2023 regular meeting.
I'll move for approval.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item number 2, presentation by Deborah Reardon, Regional Planning Manager, RTC of Southern Nevada, of the Southern Nevada Strong Regional Plan.
Good evening, Chairman McDonald, members of the Planning Commission. Just to give a little context in this agenda item. So last year, the Planning Commission had asked staff to prepare material on several training opportunities. And so over the last year, we have been bringing before the Planning Commission those items in the priorities that were set by the Planning Commission. The next to be discussed is the Southern Nevada Strong Plan. This is the regional plan for Southern Nevada. And Deborah Reardon, which is the planning manager for the RTC, is here to do an overview of the plan for you and answer Planning Commission questions.
Great. Thank you for that introduction. Good evening to the members of the Planning Commission. I'm Deb Reardon, Regional Planning Manager for the record. I'm with the Regional Transportation of Southern Nevada's Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO for short. And just want to say thanks so much to Michael, as well as all of you here today, for inviting me to join you. So today, as Michael mentioned, I'll provide a brief overview of the Southern Nevada Strong Regional Plan. That's not the PowerPoint. We'll go with it. So the Southern Nevada Strong is a plan as well as a regional collaboration for both economic resiliency as well as sustainability. It was really initiated back in 2012 by the City of Henderson on behalf of the Southern Nevada Planning Coalition. And it really was in response to two main things happening at the time. The first was an identified need to diversify the economy. The community had just come out of the Great Recession, and during that time, as well as we've seen in COVID-19, we are not as diverse as some other peer communities, and so there is an interest in moving towards actions to diversify ourselves. And next was a desire to create more sustainable communities, including improving access to jobs, housing, as well as transportation, especially targeting those populations that are the most vulnerable. And so the map that you can see on the front, I just wanted to point out that the area that we cover is actually, even beyond that map, we really focus in on all of Southern Nevada, even the outlying areas, all the way up to Mesquite. So looking at our valley as from a regional scale, getting beyond just our immediate boundaries of each jurisdiction and looking at what issues can we work on together. The plan is also really motivated by addressing growth. So when Right now, our population as a region is 2.3 million people. We're expected to add another million people, up to 3.3 million by 2050. And so by coming together, we can really identify how we can really shape how that growth should look, what we should be working towards. And that's really what spurred and continues to energize Southern Nevada Strong. So, okay, sorry about that. So it also provides a vision for things like activity centers, jobs, housing, and transit, and then a series of strategies as well as priorities organized into an overall implementation matrix. It was done through extensive input at the time. It was one of the largest efforts in the Valley as far as community engagement. It was adopted by all the Southern Nevada governments back in 2015. So it's really centered around four main themes. They're at the top of the screen there, and so I'll go through them one by one. The first is economic competitiveness as well as education. So diversifying our economy, like I mentioned, as well as to develop higher quality education systems in support of both our youth here today, making sure that the folks that are growing up here will want to stay here and be educated here, as well as developing a pipeline of folks that will want to work here. So what can we be doing through our educational system in order to influence that workforce development? The second main theme is around complete communities. So developing that mix of housing types for people of all incomes, safe and connected neighborhoods, really with a focus on infill. So how can we grow up and more concentrated maybe in certain areas versus growing out, which I know this is really in alignment with your strategic plan and goals of Boulder City, as well as building out a strong social services network and access to healthcare. Those were also and continue to be, frankly, challenges of our region that the plan works to resolve. So next is transportation choice. And so I know there's already been a lot of work here in Boulder City done with your Complete Streets projects, building our street network for people of all ages and abilities. And then also the plan envisioned a system of high capacity transit. And so even light rail, bus rapid transit were envisioned at the time as really a way not only to connect people to where they had to go, but then to also incentivize that economic development component as well. And then the last kind of major pillar of the plan is building capacity. So now that the community has the vision established, how will we really achieve it together? And so in that section of the plan identifies, the roles, who will be tracking the progress, tracking implementation, all of the KPIs, and then also increasing capacity. It's really not just a plan for local agencies, but there are lots of strategies in there for local nonprofits, and how can we as a region really help to bolster those organizations as well. So RTC's role, which is the bottom slide there, is really threefold. And so when you think of the RTC, you may think of us as the transit agency first and foremost, and that is a huge function for us. But in our role as the Metropolitan Planning Organization, we have a staff of urban planners who really have come together to work towards implementing this plan. It's not an unusual role for an MPO to take this on, as it's been done in other places. And so in this role, we do really three main things. First, we track implementation. So really evaluating how have we shifted from the baselines that were established 10 years ago to now? Where are we falling short and what actions should we be taking to improve? Next, we serve often as a convener. And so there's a Southern Nevada Strong steering committee group that meets quarterly. We also have some project-specific teams that come together to work on specific plans. And so we often will be that glue to bring people together to problem solve. And then lastly, we also fulfill a role in technical assistance. And so we provide both funding as well as staff time towards planning studies, occasionally some meeting or workshop facilitation services, or even data analysis. So really supporting the on-the-ground implementation that often happens at the municipal level. So next, I'm just going to highlight a couple examples of the technical assistance that we at the RTC are providing now, just to get a flavor for what's happening. So first is in the economic development and education component, where you're looking at supporting implementation of 4 opportunity sites. So in the plan, a couple sites were identified. The first was at Boulder Highway in Gibson, downtown North Las Vegas Medical District, and Maryland Parkway corridor. So they were really centered around, again, that high capacity transit system, and how can we work together to really incentivize economic diversification, transit-oriented development at those sites. And so we've done more detailed action plans and brought people together in order to move those forward. Next, we're really beginning to work more closely with our economic development partners, LVGEA, GoEd, as well as UNLV, to support their upcoming update to the comprehensive economic development strategy, and then also to identify what are those infrastructure needs to support economic diversification. So are there more transportation support that's needed? How do we get people to those jobs, for example? And then where are those opportunities for infill? So we're about to embark on an assessment of available land. I did take a peek at your strategic plan, and I noticed that residential infill was a goal of yours. So that's something we can potentially help you all look at. So how do we evaluate underutilized land or vacant land, and maybe where can more people fit? And so then the next section is around complete communities. So we've done some housing research and are available to continue that work as the region needs support. We're working with the health district to look at transportation access to a couple of new grocery stores that are located in food deserts. So how do we connect people to healthy foods? We also have a livable centers program that links transportation and land use together, working with the city of Henderson in this case to build out a land use and transportation plan for the Nevada State College, which is just around the corner from y'all. And then lastly, we're supporting regional open space and trails planning. So convening a group of about 15 different organizations from federal lands to local community parks, and building out that network of trails. So I know you have the Rivermount Loop Trail as one really great example connecting all the way to Lake Mead. How can we take that model and apply it across the region is another initiative that's been very important to us. For transportation choice, there's a lot of work in that. I'll just highlight one. We just finished a regional bikeway and sidewalk inventory that'll give us really great data as far as where are those gaps and just connecting those facilities as well as ADA access. So we'll be evaluating that data and then sitting down with the municipalities to figure out how maybe they can be implemented. We're also becoming more and more involved in sustainability, participating in more work around our transition to clean fuels and electrification. And then lastly, our staff have been, I think, really leaders in addressing extreme heat. So there was an extreme heat map that was developed last year that identified those locations most vulnerable. And we're actively working with partners to do climate adaptive bus shelters, adding trees, or tree canopy, both for adaptation and mitigation for carbon, and then just working across all of those implementation actions for heat. So our role, and I'll mention just one more, was the funding for capacity building with the influx of dollars related to the bipartisan infrastructure law as well as the Inflation Reduction Act. There's been really a need for more coordination or communication on who's applying for what grant, really to make sure that as much money it can come to our region as possible. And so we just started a new role of convening a small grants coordination team in order to open up those communication channels. And so our role is kind of, I'm sorry, I lost track. So I talked a little bit about what our role is and kind of at the regional scale. And I'll just really end with, how does Boulder City fit in, right? And what work has been done and could be done more in the future. And I just frame this in three buckets. And the first is regional plan implementation. And so that document has over 300, I know it's a lot, strategies, and a lot of those are intended to be led by local agencies. And so Boulder City has already, I really have to commend the staff here, have worked proactively in things like complete streets projects, water conservation pilots. As I mentioned, your strategic plan is really in alignment with Southern Nevada Strong. So looking, integrating these concepts into your local plans is one action that Boulder City is already taking. Next is participating in regional forums. So the steering committee meeting that I mentioned, as well as the projects that we have going on, just offer engagement around those. And then lastly, I mean, please think of us as a resource as you are working to implement our plan and yours. If you are coming up against things as far as like technical assistance needs, funding needs, where you might need some support, just please let your staff know or us know, and we're happy to keep our eyes open and try to identify resources for you. We at the MPO also have a call for projects, for transportation projects on the ground, as well as planning grants. And so those are both opportunities if you need support where we might be able to lend a hand. So I'll just end with our website is up there, southernnevadastrong.org. I did bring copies of the full plan. They're at the back of the room. And there's also an executive summary if you prefer the short version. And so I just want to say thanks so much for your time today, and I'm happy to answer any questions or hear your ideas around regional planning. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me start off by thank you for coming and providing such insight, giving us the resources that we need. We really do appreciate it. I'll open up to the panel if there's any questions of... Yes, we'll start down at the end, please.
Hi.
I'm interested in the water conservation portion of what you were talking about related and how that relates to the trees and shade, how you're fitting all of that together. If you could just elaborate a little bit.
Sure. I mean, SNWA would definitely be the expert in this arena, but I know that they have taken our plan and then rolled it into their overall water resource plan. There's also efforts at the local agency level to look at our overall tree palette and identify those species that are most climate adaptive, so those that'll survive our increasing temperatures, as well as those that have the least amount of water use, and then encouraging everyone really to start using those trees. So it's definitely something in progress. The Southern Nevada Regional Planning Coalition also has a recommended tree palette that's been integrated into, I believe, all the municipality development codes. So as things move forward, folks are kind of pulling from that list. There's also been discussions around, how can the region encourage even private property owners to start using those trees as well, but that hasn't been really widely approached yet.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have two questions, rail related.
Okay.
I worked on the Strip for 30 years, but I haven't been there in a long time, since I retired. Can you tell me what the status is of the monorail, and will it ever be extended to the airport?
The monorail, I'm not sure. I haven't heard plans of its expansion. I know that we at the RTC have the Maryland Parkway bus rapid transit project that's in design right now. That'll be its terminus, I believe, is Russell. So it doesn't go right to the airport, but is pretty close.
Close.
Yeah, we also have bus service that is being promoted more and more, especially from Terminal D.
And the second question is you spoke about light rail, and are you talking about commuter rail, or is this a tourist thing, or?
At this point, the implementation of the vision was focused really on bus rapid transit for right now, and so Maryland Parkway is using bus rapid transit, as well as Boulder Highway has also selected bus rapid transit as its preferred mode at this point. So really what's happening is each corridor does its own study to evaluate ridership levels, development potential, and then makes a determination around what technology fits the best.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure thing.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation.
Sure.
When I was in the room when the presentation, when it was finished.
Wow.
And I have questions about the light rail too. When you say bus rapid transit in the Maryland Parkway area, that doesn't mean a rail system? That means a bus?
It is, but it is an enhanced bus, so it has different elements that makes it feel more like rail. And so a lot of times bus rapid transit will have more level boarding platforms, it has more frequency, it has different elements that make it feel more rail-like. And I can get you more information for sure on the specific design of the Maryland Parkway system.
Okay, well, I was going to ask the same question. If that, any type of light rail, not for tourists, but for commuters, with the professional sports teams in town, potentially another one, and their location being in these high, traffic areas, if there were plans to put in a rail system, because, I really can't think of another metropolitan area like ours that doesn't have something like that.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that feedback to transit for sure. I can say that the plan didn't identify Las Vegas Boulevard as a long-term corridor. And our onboard mobility plan, which is kind of the next level for transit planning, also identifies Las Vegas Boulevard as a future opportunity for some sort of transit system. But I'll have to get back with you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
sure thing.
Okay, moving on to item number 3 for possible action, Resolution 1231, City of Boulder City. Public hearing and recommendation to City Council on a proposed amendment to Title 11 of the City Code. Mr. Mays.
So you may be asking why we're discussing the proposed landscaping ordinance now. I have a response to that. There have been several factors that have influenced staff reevaluation of the existing landscaping ordinance. The first was Nevada Assembly Bill 356. This is the bill that was approved by the legislature in 2021 that says that as of the beginning of 2027, non-functioning turf that is irrigated by the Colorado River can no longer be irrigated by the Colorado River. Now, what does non-functioning turf mean? Well, Southern Nevada Water District likes to characterize it as if it is turf that the only time somebody is actually utilizing it is when they're mowing it, is non-functioning. And I just wanted to clarify this applies to all landscaping that is not single family. So multifamily developments, commercial developments, parkways, all of those areas that are non-functioning turf can no longer be turf after that point. You've all heard about the Bureau of Reclamation's Tier 2 water shortage. As we've been dealing with the 20-year drought and the dropping levels in Lake Mead, Southern Nevada has had a reduction in the amount of water that we can use. In addition to that, as you're all familiar with the Southern Nevada Water Authority, there's been conservation efforts for years looking at ways to save water. It includes their Smart Landscaping Rebate Program. You may recall we were before you about a year ago when we were making minor amendments to the landscaping ordinance to allow for multifamily developments within the community to take advantage of that rebate program. The problem with our code previously was that it gave points, and it gave points to installing of sod. So that is in conflict with all of these efforts, and so that was addressed about a year ago. This is taking the next step toward bringing us into compliance with these water conservation efforts. And the final reason is the last time there was a major update to the landscaping code was in 1988. And so it's time to revisit it. These are just a sample of the articles that you've seen online in newspapers talking about the current water emergency and the measures being put into place, reinforcing our need to reevaluate Boulder City's landscaping ordinance. That's a picture everyone has seen about the dropping lake levels. So let me briefly summarize the changes that are before you this evening. So probably one of the most important components to the proposed text amendments and you heard it previously from Ms. Reardon, is bringing our landscaping ordinance to tie into the Southern Nevada Water Authority's acceptable plant list. So they look at trees, shrubs, ground cover, and they score them on suitability for use in a desert climate. And they give it a score of 0 through 5. The plant list was included in your packet, and with these proposed changes would be tied directly to it by reference. Further, what we're saying is that for future landscaping for projects within Boulder City, they would only be able to install those trees, shrubs, and plants that have a score of 3 or higher, so 3 to 5. So those plantings that aren't suitable for desert climates that have a score of 0 through 2 would not be permitted in Boulder City. It also recognizes where landscaping doesn't do well with new development within the community. You'll see within the red line version, we have several zoning districts that are exempted. Several of these have already been in place, but we wanted to clarify it in the updated ordinance. Also, you may have noticed in perusing the city code, we don't have the parking lot landscaping requirements in the landscaping chapter. And so we thought it was important, in order to make it a more readable and understandable ordinance, to take those out of Chapter 23 and include those in Chapter 25. So you have before you tonight the red line version, which reflects proposed changes by staff. And I just want to reiterate, it does not permit sod as landscaping. As I mentioned already, it consolidates the requirements of Chapter 25, provides for landscaping exemptions, including an administrative relief if the proposed development can't meet the landscaping requirements because of lot configurations and conditions, and then clarifies subdivision landscaping as well. A problem in the existing code is it just had vague language about parkway landscaping requirements. This clarifies it, ties it back to the landscaping chapter as proposed with the revisions, and talks about the requirements for shade trees and shrubs based on a linear foot, which is pretty consistent with other standard landscaping language. So you have before you proposed actions, and I just wanted to clarify, you can move to approve this evening Resolution 1231 with the findings that are contained within the staff report to adopt the proposed landscaping changes. You could move to deny the proposed changes and include your findings as to why you do not think this is appropriate as a text amendment. Or if the Planning Commission would like further information from staff, you could move to continue this to next month's meeting. We wanted to be able to present all this to you. It's a lot of material to take in, and certainly be happy to provide follow-up information or any proposed changes Planning Commission may have. And with that, I can answer Planning Commission questions. And just to reiterate that as a text amendment to Title 11, this does require a public hearing.
Thank you for the reminder, Michael. Do we have any questions of staff on the text amendment changes? I've got one question. It's not about the actual changes. Is do we have a mechanism in place to track this, or does SNWA track how much that we have potentially saved, or as there are renovations going through and the applicants are expected to update their landscape to now the new current code, are we able to track how much potential water we're saving? We're jumping through a lot of this stuff and we've got great efforts, but are we able to at all see if our efforts are making a difference?
Chairman McDonald, it's a very good question, and let me first just clarify that with these proposed changes to Chapter 25, it does not require retrofitting existing development. Correct. So this would be for new development coming into the community that would have to comply with these standards. And also, let me reemphasize that this does not impact single-family homeowners in any way. We currently don't regulate what landscaping they put in their yards, and we wouldn't with this proposed text amendment change. Probably the best way to track the impacts is through SNWA's rebate program, and they do calculations as to the benefits of removing the sod and the water consumption. They have calculations as to what it typically requires to irrigate sod and replacing it with a desert-tolerant suitable landscaping.
Okay, so just SNWA's rebate plan, but we don't have then a future going forward mechanism to see if all of these extra restrictive requirements are really going to benefit. I mean, I think we can safely assume they're going to do good, but if we don't have a way to track it in any way, we don't know if we can alter it or if there's one area of the ordinance that would do better than another area. So just food for thought, just something that comes to mind. I wasn't expecting us to have answers and trackability this evening.
But I think one of the things we can do, we can follow up with SNWA and find out that based on their recommended plant list, have they done studies as to what is the typical water savings? Because the challenge for us is this is going to be a moving forward ordinance that we'd be adopting, so we wouldn't be able to compare it because they wouldn't be proposing landscaping that's no longer acceptable. They'd be proposing landscaping that meets this code, and it wouldn't be able to compare and contrast with what they might have had to require for landscaping under the old ordinance.
But I've got to imagine they've got some type of estimate that they say that if this was just grass here, if we just throw in rocks, here's the estimated savings, not just financially, but from a water resource.
Correct.
Beautiful. Any other questions of staff? Anything?
Just one.
Yes, thank you.
Under the administrative variance, the last couple of words, other considerations, could you just give me one or two examples, please, of what that might entail?
So I may ask Susan to chime in because she's had 30 years of experience in trying to comply the existing ordinance to development standards. But one of the things that we have found, particularly with smaller developments, is being able to meet the parking lot landscaping requirements and the minimums. And so as Boulder City being an older community, lot dimensions are not standard. And we, again, would be looking at new development or infill development. We're trying to anticipate that there will be situations where the code requirements can't be met, and then if the developer can provide a justification of why they can't be met, this provides a vehicle for an administrative variance for staff to address.
So with that, using that example, the variance states 20% relief. So what is the, what would happen if it was up to, say, 30%? Would that come before someone else, or is it just a no-go at that point?
No, if it's a 30% relief, it's going to come back to you
Okay,
as a standard variance request.
thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Seeing as this is a public hearing, we'll open up the public hearing portion of this agenda item. Anyone wishing to be heard, please make yourself known. Members of the public may participate in this without being physically present. One of the following methods, written comments may be submitted. Were there any public comments written submitted?
No.
Okay. Members of the public may also call 702-589-9629. And I don't think we have anybody on the horn there. So we'll go ahead and close the public hearing portion of this agenda item. I will accept a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just bring up one point. This may not necessarily be the final version of the ordinance, even if the Planning Commission wishes to recommend moving ahead with this version. One thing I just noticed, because there's a lot to this, is that in our definition of permitted landscaping material, that's where we refer to trees, shrubs, and ground covers listed in the regional plant list rated 3 or higher. However, in the actual plant list, only trees and palms have that rating. Trees, palms, and syads, which are the first few pages of the document, the first column after the description, that's where that rating 1 to 5 is. But thereafter, when you start getting into shrubs and perennials and decorative grasses and cacti, etc., they don't use that rating. They either list them as a category called bulletproof, meaning they're pretty sturdy, but then there's a separate category for water use where it's labeled as very low, low, medium, or high. So staff will have to determine for the plants that don't have the 1 to 5 rating, whether or not we're going to go by water use or something else.
Understood. Does everyone on the panel understand the different ratings? Just that point of clarification. Thank you. And so back around, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve resolution number 1231, which includes findings for a recommendation in favor of AM-23-363.
I'll second.
I've got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving on to item number 4, monthly progress report.
No comment.
Thank you. And now we'll move to the final public comment. Anyone wishing to speak be heard in the final public comment? I don't have to check to see if people wrote in for the final public comment, do I? Beautiful. Thank you. All right. Anyone wishing to be heard may call in to 702-589-9629. Okay, we'll go ahead and close the final public comment. And this ends the meeting. Meeting adjourned.
Yeah, sure, Michael.
Do you have to play a ton of those? 'Cause I'm sure